Amara and Ikechukwu met in one of those moments that life seems to give you when you least expect it. Almost like fate was playing a game. It wasn't some grand romantic setting like the movies, but in the corner of a bustling mama put in Lagos. Amara had just wrapped up a meeting with some colleagues at her architecture firm, and she was drained. The weight of the project deadlines pressed heavily on her shoulders, and she couldn't help but feel like there was more to life than just endless work. It was one of those days when everything felt out of balance, and all she wanted was a quiet moment to herself with some hot amala and a ewedu soup. As she sat in the small mama put just round the corner from her office, eating her amala, Amara thought about the blueprints for a new design project. She wasn't just an architect by title. She was a woman in a male-dominated field, fighting for her place and constantly battling imposter syndrome. She longed for something more, something deeper than just winning battles in boardrooms and fighting for recognition. At that moment, Ikechukwu walked in, and the world turned around. Amara seemed to blur. He wasn't the type to stand out in a crowd. He was tall, but not imposing. Quiet, but not shy. There was something about the way he carried himself, though, that made people want to take notice. Ikechukwu had always been someone who didn't seek attention, even though he worked in a demanding job in banking. People liked him, respected him, but they didn't know the whole of him. To them, he was just Ikechukwu, the reliable, calm professional with a steady job and a predictable life. But inside, there were complexities that haven't even begun to explore. That day, he sat down near the table, ordered some amala, and somehow, without a word, their paths crossed. It wasn't an instant connection, but something in the air seemed to shift when their eyes met. They exchanged polite smiles at first, both of them preoccupied with their own worlds. But then, Ikechukwu, noticing that she was deep in thought, decided to break the silence. He leaned over and said, "You look like you're designing the future." Amara raised an eyebrow, surprised by the observation, but smiled. It wasn't often that someone noticed the depth of her work beyond the surface. "Well, something like that," she replied. From there, a simple conversation blossomed about architecture, work struggles, their personal lives, and their dreams. Ikechukwu, though reserved, had a dry sense of humor that Amara found unexpectedly charming. She wasn't usually one to open up easily, but Ikechukwu's laid-back, nonchalant nature had a way of making her feel comfortable in a way no one else had. Weeks passed, and the two of them continued meeting to have lunch since their offices were in the same vicinity. Sometimes they just met to chat, and sometimes to share the stresses of their day. They spoke about everything from childhood memories to their hopes for the future, and gradually the connection grew. Amara had always been fiercely independent, never one to rely on anyone. But with Ikechukwu, she found herself opening up in ways she never had before. One evening, after a particularly rough day at the office, Ikechukwu surprised her by showing up with dinner from her favorite restaurant. No grand gestures, just a simple meal and company. It was in that moment that Amara realized she didn't have to choose between her career and a loving partner. With Ikechukwu, she could have both, a fulfilling career and someone who truly understood her. Months later, on a calm Sunday afternoon, Ikechukwu proposed. There were no fireworks, no dramatic speeches, just the two of them sitting in a quiet restaurant, enjoying each other's company. With a steady look in his eyes, Ikechukwu took her hand. "Amara, I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" She had always been a planner, but for the first time, she didn't need to think about it. She knew. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I will. I will marry you. Their wedding was everything they dreamed of. Simple, elegant, and filled with love. They built a home together. They started building their futures, and soon the world seemed full of possibilities. But as time went on, Amara began to feel a subtle but persistent unease creeping into her life. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Her career as an architect was flourishing. Her family was thriving, and her marriage to Ikechukwu was filled with love. Yet, deep within, there was a restlessness she couldn't ignore. The ambition that had once propelled her forward with excitement now felt like a heavy burden, pressing down on her shoulders. It wasn't Ikechukwu. She adored him more deeply than she had ever loved anyone. He was her anchor, her constant source of support. But this feeling wasn't about him. It wasn't even about her family. It was about something within her, an inexplicable void. She began questioning everything, feeling as if she was standing at a crossroad, unsure of which path to take. Was this life, with all its milestones and achievements, truly the one she wanted? Or had she lost sight of herself in the pursuit of what society and ambition had defined as success? It was during a quiet evening at her favorite wine bar when Amara's friend Nkechi casually mentioned Prophet Madu for the first time. Nkechi wasn't someone Amara considered as particularly spiritual. She was a fellow architect, sharp-witted, practical, and a no-nonsense kind of woman. They often spent their afternoon work hours talking shop, laughing about office gossip, and venting about clients who were more demanding than they deserved. But that evening, as they sipped their wine, Nkechi's tone shifted. "I have been seeing Prophet Madu," she said, not looking directly at Amara, but swirling her glass slowly, as if weighing her words. Amara raised an eyebrow, pausing mid-sip. "Prophet Madu, you? Seriously?" Nkechi smiled faintly, an almost amused look in her eyes. "I know it sounds odd, but hear me out. There's something about him. He's not like the others." Nkechi's voice softened as she continued. "People say he can see into your life, your future, and even the things you're struggling with, whether you like it or not. He helps you find clarity. He gives answers that you never thought you needed." I was skeptical at first too, but I don't know. There's just something about the way he speaks. It feels right. Amara felt a slight shiver run down her spine. She had never been one to entertain the idea of spiritual guides or prophets. She prided herself on being grounded in logic, the kind of woman who solved problems with plans, not prayers. She had heard rumors of Prophet Madu, of course. He was a name that seemed to float through at conversations at work, in the streets, at family gatherings. People spoke of him with reverence, almost as though they feared him in some way. But to Amara, it all seemed like smoke and mirrors, a play on people's vulnerabilities. "I don't know, Nkechi. You know me. I'm not into all that." Amara chuckled nervously, hoping her skepticism would mask the unease she suddenly felt. "I mean, I'm doing fine. No need for some prophet to tell me what I already know." Nkechi, though, didn't seem deterred. "It's not about what you know. It's about what you don't know. He helps you see things clearer, helps you find your way. You've been a little off lately, Amara. I can see it. Maybe you should just talk to him, even if it's just to put your mind at ease." Amara looked away, her thoughts drifting to the growing unease she had been feeling for weeks. It wasn't something she could easily describe, but something had shifted inside her. The weight of her work, the pressure to constantly prove herself in her career, her responsibilities to Ikechukwu and her kids. It was all beginning to feel like too much. She had tried to push the feeling away, throwing herself deeper into her work. But it didn't help. The exhaustion, the doubt, the nagging feeling that something was wrong. She couldn't escape it. Still, she wasn't about to walk into some stranger's office just because her friend had an epiphany. Amara was a woman of reason. She believed in hard work, in tangible results, not in waiting for answers to come through some spiritual leader. But as she thought about it some more, the idea started to linger in the back of her mind. Over the next few days, she started hearing more about Prophet Madu. A colleague at work mentioned how Madu had helped her cousin, who had been struggling with a stuck career, and now she was thriving in her new job. Another friend posted a photo on social media, standing beside the Prophet after what she described as a life-changing session. And even more unsettling were the whispered conversations at family meetings, where relatives talked about the Prophet as if it were some secret cure-all for all their worries. The more Amara tried to dismiss it, the more the name Prophet Madu seemed to follow her. She caught herself imagining his calm, steady voice, the way he was described, someone who didn't just listen but understood. It wasn't that she believed in the supernatural, but maybe, just maybe, there was something to the mystery surrounding him. One evening, after a particularly draining week of meetings, deadlines, endless client calls, and caring for her family, which drained her energy, Amara found herself unable to shake off the thought. She sat on the edge of her bed, her mind spinning with the pressures of her career, her family, and the weight of her own expectations. Her body felt heavy, as though it had absorbed all the stress and confusion from the week. Ikechukwu had been understanding, but even his gentle reassurance couldn't quiet the unrest growing inside her. She thought of Prophet Madu again. What if he could help her untangle the mess in her mind? What if he could offer clarity on what she was really feeling? I can't keep ignoring it, she whispered to herself, almost in disbelief. She had never been one to entertain these kinds of things, but something inside her had shifted. Perhaps it was the frustration that had built up over time. Or maybe it was the exhaustion of feeling lost in her own life. That night, she found herself Googling Prophet Madu's name, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she wrestled with the decision. Every search result led to more testimonials, more praise. But was it real? Could it really help her? The next morning, she made the call. Her heart beat faster as she dialed the number she had found online. The receptionist's voice was warm, welcoming, and soothing. Would you like to book an appointment with Prophet Madu? He's available tomorrow afternoon. Amara's hand trembled slightly as she confirmed the appointment. Yes, please. She hung up, her mind racing. Was she making a mistake? Was this really the right choice? Amara knew herself well enough to understand that this was unlike anything she had ever done before. She had never looked for answers outside of herself. She had always been self-sufficient, the one people turned to for advice, the one who knew exactly what she was doing. But now she found herself at a crossroad. She couldn't ignore the tension that was gnawing at her anymore, the unease, the uncertainty. It had become too much to bear. As the time of her appointment approached, Amara felt a mix of anticipation and doubt swelling inside her. Part of her wanted to back out, to pretend that this was all just some passing fancy. But deep down, she knew she had to go. For whatever reason, she just couldn't shake the feeling that Prophet Madu might just hold the answers that she so desperately needed. What she didn't know was that this meeting would unravel everything she thought she knew about herself and change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Amara hesitated at the entrance to Prophet Madu's modest compound, her stomach twisting in knots. A part of her wanted to turn around and leave, to dismiss the whole thing as a mistake. But something, a nagging voice in the back of her mind, urged her forward. The rusted gate creaked as she opened it, its sound cutting through the stillness of the late afternoon. She glanced around, noting the worn walls of the building, the overgrown shrubs lining the path, and the faint hum of voices chanting somewhere in the distance. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the place itself held secrets too heavy to bear. With each step closer to the door, doubt gnawed at her. Why am I here? What am I hoping to find? She was one to trust easily, and certainly not someone she had only heard about through whispers in the market. Yet the weight of her unease, of the restless dreams, and the sense of something missing had driven her here. As she went in, she noticed that the room was dimly lit. The scent of burning incense hung heavy in the air. Amara hesitated at the threshold, unsure if stepping inside was the right decision. But a gentle voice from within beckoned her. "Come in, my child," Prophet Madu said, his voice calm yet commanding. He was seated cross-legged on a mat, a worn leather Bible in his lap, his eyes closed as if he had been expecting her long before she arrived. Amara stepped inside, her heart pounding. She tried to steady her breathing, feeling an odd mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The walls of the room were adorned with symbols she didn't recognize, paintings of doves, flames, and a lone towering tree. "You seek clarity," Prophet Madu said without opening his eyes. Amara froze. She hadn't uttered a single word. How did he know? He opened his eyes, their piercing gaze locking with hers. "You are burdened, yet you do not know by what. Your spirit is restless. Your dreams whisper truths you refuse to hear." Amara's knees weakened, and she sank into the chair opposite him. How did he know about her dreams? The ones where she stood on stages alone while shadows loomed behind her. I don't know why I'm here," she stammered, feeling exposed under his gaze. Prophet Madu leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You are here because destiny brought you. Your purpose is calling, but you have allowed distractions, attachments to cloud your path. You feel it, don't you? That you were made for more." Amara swallowed hard. The words felt like a direct arrow to her chest. She had never said those thoughts aloud, not even to herself, yet they rang true. "Your star is bright," he continued, "but stars cannot shine when they are bound to earthly weights. You must cleanse your spirit. Remove the chains that hold you back." "Chains?" Amara repeated, confused. "Your life is full of noise. Work, family, routine. They pull you in every direction but forward. The greatness within you cannot thrive in such chaos." She sat frozen, grappling with his words. Was her life really a series of chains holding her down? Her career, her family, were they distractions from something greater? Prophet Madu reached into a wooden box beside him and pulled out a small vial of oil. He poured a drop onto his fingers and reached towards her forehead. "This is just the beginning. Open your heart to what is to come. Your spirit will guide you. But remember, sacrifices must be made for a higher purpose." Amara didn't resist as he anointed her forehead. The oil was cool against her skin, and as he muttered prayers, her eyes fluttered shut. Images flashed in her mind, vivid, overwhelming. A lone figure standing tall on a mountaintop, hands raised towards the heavens, as those below knelt in reverence. When she opened her eyes, Prophet Madu was smiling faintly. "You will understand in time. Go in peace, my child." As Amara walked out of the room, her heart was heavy. His words echoed in her mind. Sacrifices must be made. Your purpose is calling. She didn't know what to make of it, Yet deep down, she felt as though a door had been opened, one she couldn't easily close. The days after her appointment with Prophet Madu passed in a haze. At first, Amara thought it was just the excitement of trying something new, a momentary glimpse from her usual controlled existence. But as the days turned into weeks, the weight of his words began to grow heavier, settling into the quiet corners of her mind like a dark cloud that refused to lift. It started with the dreams. At night, when Amara closed her eyes, she found herself on a grand stage, the spotlight blinding, the crowd's applause deafening. She was dressed in a flowing gown, looking every bit the successful woman she had always aspired to be. But as the applause rang out, she couldn't see the faces of the people in the crowd. They were shadows, dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to loom, waiting in the wings. And then the strange part, her family. She turned to see Ikechukwu standing in the shadows, his face obscured, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. The children were there too, their little faces pale, their bodies chained to the ground by invisible forces. They weren't clapping, they weren't smiling, they were watching her. But it was as if they were trapped in some unseen prison. The chains tightened with every round of applause, every accolade she received. The dreams were never the same, but they were always with a haunting image. Each time the shadows in the crowd grew darker. Each time the chains on her family grew tighter. She awoke in cold sweats, the oppressive feeling of her family's silent observation lingering long after she opened her eyes. The guilt gnawed at her, and yet there was a strange pull, a feeling of destiny too strong to ignore. She tried to push the dreams away, dismissing them as the product of stress. But the more she tried to forget, the more vivid they became. Amara found herself staring out of the window during the day, her mind wandering to places she didn't want to go. She couldn't shake the thought that Prophet Madu had said something that she couldn't just shake off. Those his words. To fulfill your purpose, sacrifices must be made. That wasn't just advice. That was a warning. The tension built inside her, a growing need to understand what this all meant. The unease she felt became a constant presence in her chest, like a weight pressing down with each passing moment. She found herself retreating further into herself, avoiding the people who used to be her anchor. Amara couldn't take it any longer. She had to go back. Prophet Madu had not given her any answers, only questions, and the growing feeling inside her was suffocating. She needed clarity. She needed to know what was happening to her mind, her life, her soul. So she called the prophet again. This time, when she sat across from him in the dimly lit room, something felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and the silence between them was suffocating. Prophet Madu didn't speak right away. He studied her, his eyes penetrating, as if he could see straight through her. He had this way of making her feel like he knew everything, the things she hadn't even told herself. When he spoke up, his voice was low, almost a whisper, but it seemed to echo in the room. To fulfill your purpose, sacrifices must be made, he said. The words landed like stones, heavy and final. Your destiny is too great to waste, Amara. You have been given a gift, but it comes at a cost. Amara's heart skipped. A gift? What was he talking about? She had always been the one who worked hard to build her career, her family, her life. She had never believed in fate, in destiny. Everything she achieved, she had earned with her own two hands. The idea that she was special, that she had a purpose beyond what she had already accomplished, seemed impossible. But the way he looked at her, the way his eyes held a knowing glint, made her question everything she thought she knew. "What kind of sacrifice?" she asked, her voice trembling, despite her best efforts to sound calm. "What do you mean?" Prophet Madu's gaze never wavered. "That, Amara, is something you will have to decide for yourself. But know this, there are forces at play. Forces that will push you to your limits. To rise, you must be willing to let go of what weighs you down." As Amara left his presence that day, her mind was in turmoil. The world outside felt distant, as though she was walking through a fog. Her family, her career, her life. Everything was beginning to feel like it was slipping through her fingers, and the more she tried to hold on, the more distant it seemed. The following days were the hardest. Amara became irritable, snapping, as though something inside her was slowly unraveling. She found herself yelling at Ikechukwu over trivial things, her patience thinning to nothing. When he asked her what was wrong, she couldn't bring herself to tell him. She couldn't explain the confusion that plagued her every waking moment, the pressure mounting inside her chest. She couldn't tell him that Prophet Madu had spoken of sacrifices, of things she might have to lose, and that she wasn't sure she could handle it. Ikechukwu, ever the calm presence in her life, began to notice the changes. He tried to reach out, to understand what was going on inside her, but Amara pushed him away. She was afraid of what he might think, afraid of how he might see her. If she told him about the prophet, about the strange visions, about the feelings of being torn between her family and her supposed destiny, would he think she was losing her mind? One evening, after Amara had snapped at him over something trivial, Ikechukwu sat her down. "Amara, you have been very distant. I don't know what's going on with you, but this isn't you. Maybe you need to see someone, a therapist, someone who can help." The suggestion stung. She didn't want to admit that something was wrong, that she was spiraling. The last thing she wanted was for Ikechukwu to think she was unstable, out of control. "I don't need therapy," she snapped. "I'm fine." But inside, she wasn't fine. Not at all. The more Amara distanced herself from her family, the more she felt a pull to Prophet Madu. The strange dreams, the words, the sense of something looming on the horizon. It all seemed too much to ignore. And yet, the thought of losing her family, of making the sacrifices the prophet spoke of, terrified her. Her relationships began to fracture. Ikechukwu grew concerned, but he didn't understand. She couldn't explain it to him. Not yet. The weight of her choices was too heavy, and the fear of what might come next if she gave in to what Prophet Madu had suggested was suffocating. Amara didn't know what she was becoming, but she couldn't stop herself from walking down the path, no matter where it led. The world she once knew, her job, her friends, her family, her church, they all seemed insignificant compared to the path that Prophet Madu had laid out for her. Every waking moment was consumed by the pull of something larger, something she could barely comprehend. Her destiny was calling, and the further she got, the more she felt she had to sever her old life. She began by quietly withdrawing from all church activities. No more Sunday services, no more community events. Her absence went unnoticed at first, but it wasn't long before Ikechukwu began to question her sudden detachment. "Amara," he said one evening, his voice tinged with concern. "Why aren't you going to church anymore? You've always loved it. You are different now." Amara didn't know how to explain what was happening inside her. How Prophet Madu's words had taken root in her soul. How his teaching seemed to resonate with a part of her that had long been buried. She could feel a strange, almost magnetic pull to him. His presence had become an anchor in her tumultuous mind, the only source of certainty in a world that now felt fragile and fleeting. "Maybe I need some time," she muttered, not meeting his eyes. "I'm just overwhelmed." I need space to think. But the truth was far darker. She wasn't just overwhelmed, she was lost. And in the silence of her mind, Prophet Madu's voice echoed louder and louder. Amara didn't hesitate when the opportunity arose. She started attending Prophet Madu's prayer sessions in secret. His followers were a devout group, their eyes glazed with devotion, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of his chants. The atmosphere was thick with incense and the weight of unspoken promises. Amara felt like a spectator at first, watching the fervor around her. But soon, she too was swept up in it, her own body moving, her spirit surrendering. Prophet Madu was everything she had hoped for. He seemed to have the answers to the questions she never dared ask. And the deeper she went into his teachings, the more she understood the necessity of his guidance. He spoke of purity, of detachment from the physical world, of cleansing the soul from earthly attachments. One night, after a particularly intense session, Madu spoke directly to her. He was close now, his presence almost suffocating. To rise above your family's chains, you must first cleanse your spirit, Amara. Let go of everything that binds you. Your destiny is too great for you to be held back by these attachments. His words were like a spark to dry wood. Amara's heart began to race, her thoughts spinning wildly. The chains, the visions, her family, the very ones who had loved her, who had supported her. Were they the chains that kept her from fulfilling her purpose? Were they the ones holding her back from something greater? In that moment, Amara made a decision. She had to free herself. Free herself from everything that stood in the way of her destiny, even if it meant letting go of those she loved. A new dream came shortly after. It was different from all the others, more vivid, more terrifying. Amara was standing on top of a towering skyscraper, her feet teetering on the edge. The wind howled around her. The city below, a blur of lights and shadows. Her children, their faces pale and twisted in fear, clung to her legs. Their tiny hands gripped her with an unnatural strength, their bodies pulling her down, pulling her away from the edge she was meant to reach. The struggle was maddening. Amara tried to pull away from them, to rise above their grasp, but the weight of their presence was suffocating. Their cries filled the air, their voices a chorus of desperation. And in the midst of the chaos, she heard Prophet Madu's voice, cold and clear. Only you can decide, Amara. Only you can decide. The words echoed in her ears, vibrating through her very soul. She woke up, gasping for breath, her heart pounding, her body drenched in sweat. She didn't know what to make of it, but she knew one thing for sure. It was a sign. A sign that she was standing on the precipice of something monumental. Amara was no longer unsure. The decision had been made. She began to plan. It started small at first, just fleeting thoughts that quickly turned into something darker, more sinister. She justified each thought as a step towards her ultimate purpose, a necessary part of the cleansing process that Prophet Madu had spoken about. The more she thought about it, the more it made sense. How could she fulfill her destiny if she remained tied to the people who had kept her grounded, who had kept her from reaching for something greater? She had already made the decision to pull away emotionally, to sever the invisible cords that bound her to Ikechukwu, to the children. But now she needed to act. She needed to ensure there would be no distractions, no lingering attachments that could pull her back from the edge. Every action was a step towards her fate, her destiny. Amara began researching ways to make her family's death look like an accident. She spent hours scouring the internet, reading up on poisoning, car crashes, and fires. Each plan she devised seemed more practical than the last. She wasn't scared. She wasn't nervous. In her mind, this was all part of the plan, a necessary sacrifice for the life she was meant to live. She told herself it would be painless, quick. Ikechukwu will be the first. His absence will be the easiest to explain. The children, that was the hardest part. But it was the final step, one that would ensure there was nothing left to hold her back. She couldn't risk leaving them alive, could she? They were the ones who had been pulling her down, holding her to the earth. In the quiet of the night, Amara would lie awake, imagining what life would be like after they were gone. She would be free. Free to live the life that Prophet Madu had promised her. Free to step into the destiny that had been waiting for her all along. And yet, as she lay there, a small nagging voice in the back of her mind whispered that she was losing herself, losing touch with the woman she had once been. But that voice was quickly silenced. There was no turning back now. The spiral had already begun. The evening air was heavy with the scent of cooking spices, a familiar aroma that usually brought warmth and comfort to Amara's home. But tonight, it felt different, tinged with a sense of dread that hung over her like a storm cloud. Amara stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she stirred the pot. The dinner was simple, just rice and stew, but tonight it would carry a far more sinister purpose. As she reached for the bottle of poison she had carefully hidden in the back of the cupboard, a wave of hesitation washed over her. She could almost feel the weight of her family's love pressing down on her, making her question everything she had come to believe. Nkem, her youngest, came running into the kitchen, her small arms wide open for a hug. "Mommy, I love you," Nkem said, her voice innocent and sweet as she wrapped her arms around Amara's legs. The tenderness of the moment made Amara's heart ache. For a brief, terrifying moment, Amara felt her resolve falter. This was her child, her flesh and blood, the little girl she carried and nurtured for so long. How could she do this? How could she betray the very people who had loved her without question? But then Prophet Madu's voice echoed in her mind, cold and unwavering. To rise above, sacrifices must be made. Your destiny is too great to waste. The words swelled in her mind like a mantra, drowning out the voice of her conscience. The hesitation faded as quickly as it had come. With a steady hand, Amara poured the poison into the stew, watching as it dissolved in the simmering liquid. She could already hear the laughter and chatter of her family at the dinner table. But this time, it felt distant. She wasn't really there with them anymore. Her mind had already crossed into another world, one where there was no turning back. Dinner was served, and they ate as they always did, with laughter and love filling the room. Ikechukwu talked about his day at work, and the children chatted about school. Amara smiled, but it was empty. Her stomach twisted with each bite that they took, her eyes darting from one family member to the next, watching for the signs that they had ingested the poison. And then it began. First, Ikechukwu stopped talking, his face contorting in confusion. His hand shot to his chest, and he collapsed forward on the table. Nkem cried out, her voice full of fear, but Amara barely heard her. She was watching as the poison took effect, their bodies going limp one by one, their eyes rolling back into their heads. It was working. A cold, triumphant smile spread across Amara's face as she watched them struggle to breathe. The realization sinking in. This was her freedom. She had done it. She had freed herself from the chains that had bound her. But even as the thought passed her mind, a wave of nausea washed over her. She could taste the poison in her mouth, feel it clawing at her throat. She wanted to scream, to beg for forgiveness, but she couldn't. She had gone too far. As Ikechukwu and the children lay struggling for their lives on the floor, Amara sat back, overwhelmed by a mix of triumph and horror. This was it, the accumulation of everything she had been taught. She had freed herself, or so she thought. The moment she had been waiting for had arrived. Amara rushed to Prophet Madu's house, eager to tell him that the deed was done. Her pulse quickened as she approached the house, the anticipation rising in her chest. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. The house was silent. The windows darkened. Her heart began to race, but she told herself that she was being silly. Prophet Madu was probably just busy with his other followers. Or maybe he had gone out for the night. She knocked again, harder this time, and then again, but nothing. She heard nothing. Nobody came to the door. Panic set in as Amara pushed the door open. The house was abandoned, empty, cold, and lifeless. The walls were bare, stripped of the religious symbols she remembered. The faint scent of incense she had noticed before was gone, replaced by a stale, musty odor. The furniture, everything she recalled from her visits, was absent. Her mind scrambled for an explanation, but the truth hit her like a blow to the stomach. Her knees buckled, and she gripped the door frame for support. This can't be right. She stumbled outside, her heart pounding in her chest. Spotting a woman sweeping her front porch across the street, Amara hurried over, her voice trembling. Please, where's Prophet Madu?" she asked, her voice spilling out in a rush. The woman paused, looking at Amara with confusion. Prophet who? Prophet Madu! He lived there, Amara insisted, pointing at the house. I came to see him just some days ago. The woman's face twisted in thought before she shook her head. That house? It has been vacant for months. Nobody has lived there since the old tenant passed away. The ground seemed to shift beneath Amara's feet. No, that's not possible. I was here. I spoke to him. I saw him in this same house. The woman backed away slightly, unnerved by Amara's frantic tone. Maybe you are mistaken, she said softly, before disappearing into her home. Amara's hand shook as she pulled out her phone to call Nkechi, her friend who had first mentioned Prophet Madu. When Nkechi answered, her warm, familiar voice was a lifeline, until Amara brought up the name. Nkechi, I went to see Prophet Madu and... Who? Nkechi interrupted. Prophet Madu. You told me about him, remember? There was a long pause. Amara, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have never mentioned any prophet to you. Amara's breath hitched. You did. You told me how he helps people for clarity. How he... Amara, Nkechi said firmly, concern creeping into her voice. I don't know anyone by that name. Are you okay? Amara hung up without answering, her mind spinning. Amara's heart raced as she staggered away from Prophet Madu's abandoned house. The neighbors' bewildered faces, their dismissals of knowing anyone by that name, and Nkechi's insistence that she had never heard of such a person echoed in her mind. Desperate for answers, Amara began retracing her steps. She revisited the spots where she had heard others talk about Prophet Madu, the markets, the salon, the church parking lot. Each time she was met with blank stares or shrugged shoulders. The visions of Prophet Madu grew hazier in her memory, like smoke slipping through her fingers. Had she really met him? Or was it all in her head? Prophet Madu had been real, hadn't he? She had sat across from him, taken his instructions, and obeyed his words. She replayed their meeting in her mind, grasping for proof. But the more she tried, the hazier it became. Her legs felt like lead as she made her way back to her home. The prophet had promised her greatness, a divine destiny. But now, it all felt like a cruel joke. When she reached her house, everywhere was deathly quiet. She made her way slowly to the house. She had left her family at dinner, their plates laden with poisoned food. convinced that their deaths were the key to unlocking her destiny. But now, she was too afraid to face what was inside those closed doors. The silence was deafening as she opened the door, expecting to find their lifeless bodies. Instead, she found chaos. Ikechukwu was slumped on the couch, groaning in pain, while the children were huddled together, weak but alive. The scene before her was unreal. The dinner table was unturned and remnants of the poisoned food lay scattered on the floor. "Mommy," Nkem's voice jolted her. She rushed to them instinctively, her mind torn between relief and horror. They were alive. But how? It seemed the poison didn't kill them. And unknown to her, her phone had been on silent and she didn't realize that her husband had been calling her. When she didn't answer, they had called a neighbor who had helped them to call an ambulance. Ikechukwu was very weak, but he informed Amara that the ambulance was on the way. Amara's confusion deepened when paramedics arrived, followed by the police. Their neighbor, whom Ikechukwu had called for help, had raised the alarm. Ikechukwu's strength was enough to mutter to the police. The food. Something was wrong with the food. Before being carried out on a stretcher, the children were rushed alongside him. Left standing in her empty home, Amara felt the walls closing in. She was overwhelmed with conflicting emotions, horror that her plan had failed, relief that her family was alive, and the growing fear of the repercussions. The weight of her actions bore down on her as she realized that there was no Prophet Madu, no destiny, and no divine purpose to justify what she had done. Over the following days, Amara's world unraveled completely. Her family remained in the hospital under observation. Tests revealed traces of poison, and though their recovery was slow, they were stable. Ikechukwu grew increasingly suspicious of the circumstances surrounding their near-death experience. Amara avoided visiting them, citing her own sickness as an excuse. She said she had barely eaten dinner that day because she was unwell and that she was still feeling ill. In truth, she was terrified of facing them, especially Ikechukwu. How would she explain where she went to while her family was dying from the poisoned food she served them? How would she explain why she didn't eat the poisoned food? The questions rattled around in her head. She stayed locked in the house, the memories of that night playing on an endless loop in her mind. Her paranoia deepened as she became convinced that Ikechukwu knew and that the police would come for her at any time. She tried calling Nkechi again, desperate to make sense of what had happened. "Nkechi, please, think. You introduced me to Prophet Madu. You told me to go and see him." "Amara," Nkechi's voice was stern and worried. "I never told you about any prophet. Are you okay? You are scaring me." That conversation shattered any last thread of her sanity. Had she imagined it all? Was she losing her mind? The memories of Prophet Madu, his piercing eyes, his cryptic words, were they real, or were they the product of her desperation and admission? As the days turned into weeks, the truth began to surface. Ikechukwu was very suspicious of Amara, and his suspicion led to an investigation. With the help of the police, the investigations revealed that Amara had visited a so-called Prophet Madu, and that she had been behaving rather strange the last few weeks. Yet, curiously, there was no trace of the so-called prophet. The house, as confirmed by the neighbors, had been vacant for months. When Ikechukwu confronted Amara, she broke down. Through tears, she confessed to everything. The poison, the visions, the prophet, and her belief that their deaths were necessary for her divine purpose. But instead of rage, Ikechukwu responded with heartbreak. "Amara," he said quietly, "you need help. This isn't you." Amara's arrest followed soon after. The authorities pieced together the timeline, but without tangible evidence of the Prophet Madu's existence, her story was dismissed as the delusions of a deeply troubled mind. Her confession sealed her fate, and she was charged with attempted murder. In prison, Amara's isolation grew complete. Haunted by the memories of her family, she began seeing them in every shadow and hearing their voices in every quiet moment. The prophet's voice, too, lingered, taunting her with promises of greatness that she would never achieve. Through therapy sessions mandated by the prison, fragments of clarity began to emerge. Amara realized that her ambition had been a double-edged sword, wielded not for progress, but as a means of escaping the deep dissatisfaction that she had buried for years. The prophet, whether real or imagined, had been a manifestation of her inner turmoil, a desperate attempt to assign meaning to her restlessness. She was a very troubled woman. Her family, though alive, had severed ties with her. Ikechukwu filed for divorce and gained full custody of the children. Nkem's letters, written with hesitant forgiveness, were the only connection she had left to the life she had destroyed. Years later, Amara sat in her cell, staring at the sunlight streaming through the barred window. Her reflection in the small cracked mirror showed a woman aged beyond her years. She spent her days journaling, recounting her story as a warning to others. Ambition is a fire, she wrote in one entry. It can warm you, guide you, or consume you entirely. Mine consumed me. The prophet's name became a ghost of her past, a reminder of how far she had fallen. Whether he had been real or a fragment of her fractured mind no longer mattered. What mattered was the truth she had uncovered too late. Her family had been her destiny all along, and she had destroyed it in pursuit of a lie. As she closed her journal, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She whispered into the silence, "I am sorry. I am very, very sorry." But what came back to her was silence. Only silence. Amara's tragic end speaks to the dangers of letting external voices drown out one's inner wisdom, the destructive power of unchecked ambition, and the devastating impact of ignoring our mental health. Her downfall is a warning about the importance of balance in life, understanding that true fulfillment doesn't come from blind obedience, ambition, or self-denial, but from love, self-awareness, and the compassion for others. Thank you for watching. Share this with a friend and subscribe if you love suspense stories like this one. And please check out the other stories on my channel. Bye.